Frank, what are you doing?
What does it look like you're doing?
Are you like training for something? I mean, what?
JB, it's the last year, the extra eligibility year. I have my year of eligibility left.
COVID eligibility year?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm getting ready. I think it's time. I hit the gridiron. You're going to be alone this season because I'm going to be on the sideline. See, I'm ready.
I can tell. Holy cow. Well, what a way to kick off the new season.
Yep. Who's your co-host going to be now?
I don't know. Coach Cat's pretty cool. You know, at least we get to talk about hip-hop and stuff like that. I mean, who else? Big Tone.
Could you hurry it up? I'm getting a little tired here.
Okay. Welcome to season 17 of In the Huddle.
So on the way downstairs, JB reminded me it doesn't really work that way with eligibility. I guess I'm in it for the long haul here in season 17.
17.
How old were we when we started this thing? I was, 2008. I was 32. I'm 48 now. You
34.
Yeah. Wow, we've grown older. You stay the same age of your players.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird how that happens, but you still welcome us into your different facilities all the time to interview, do the things we do around the D3 world. So we thank you for that. We are back. We will be back until kind of either they tell us not to show up anymore or life takes us, in other directions. Speaking of which, a lot of people have been asking us, hey, guys, where have you been? What's going on? Yeah. What's been up in your world?
Just the usual stuff. I've got a day job that we don't make our living doing in the Huddle, but I'm 2.5 years into my stint at Korn Ferry International, and so far so good. Should be something on LinkedIn you'll see pretty soon. Maybe after this show debuts. Some good news. I've had a good year, and kids are doing well in college. We got one kid out. We got one who's going to be a senior, and I'll be back in Massachusetts in the next couple of weeks to get 2 more to their sophomore year. So we're working them out, getting them out of the house.
I was sworn in for my full term as mayor because it was basically a partial term before.
That's right.
So I get 4 years at this point, and that'll make it a total of 6, and that should be plenty at that point. But that was back in January, and we've been busy doing the mayor thing along the way, but also flag football stuff. And I've been invited back to Gable actually this year to
cool.
referee there. So
I was wondering, was there any possibility that you could be flag football ref for the Olympics in LA in 4 years?
Others have asked me that. We'll see what their needs are, I guess, and how they're going to choose their referees.
That'd be cool.
But JB, we're not here to talk about us, really.
No, we're definitely the least interesting part about this show, that's for sure.
Yeah, but throughout the next couple of weeks, you're going to see episodes with not just us. This is going to be a little bit more us-centric, this episode. Mm-hmm. But we're going to go into regions 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6 in 3 different episodes coming up. We'll be doing interviews between now and kickoff, which is September 5th officially, I believe.
Yeah.
That's a Thursday evening, and there's a rumor that you will be joining me in Troy, New York.
Just gotta book my flights.
Yep. Troy, New York for lacrosse at RPI, Wisconsin Lacrosse RPI.
E-Cave.
Will post-Kaiser Helterbrand life be all that for lacrosse? That's a huge question out there. And for RPI, with Jay Kazanowski coming back, and I think getting more and more comfortable as the season went along. I'm interested to see this game because RPI, I think, can win this game.
Yeah, I think so too. we were a little undersold on Wisconsin lacrosse last season, and they proved us to be pretty wrong with that prediction. Sorry, guys. But they did lose some pretty key components of their offense and defense. Meanwhile, RPI, with this COVID year thing and the graduate school programs that they offer, have really taken advantage, and they have kept these core, pretty large senior and graduate level classes. This is the last year that's going to happen, though, and I think this is the smallest class that RPI has had in the last couple of years, too. But Jake Kazanowski, amazing quarterback. Should be a great game. I'm excited to be up there.
So that's coming up in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. Let's see. First things we should talk about, go backward to 2023 and the Cortland Stag Bowl. We hit it pretty hard during our final show of season 16. Went through that extraordinary Stag Bowl, how surreal it was for us being on that sideline or those sidelines.
My first one might have been the best one ever. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, you better be booking to Texas then right now for this year.
January, which is a definite change.
Yep, and that is one big change. We'll talk a little bit more about why that happened in a little bit.
Yep.
But the Cortland Stag Bowl, winning by basically the 1 point.
Just one.
And, just the tale of two halves, always responding to that North Central team. But Luke Landon was just phenomenal in that second half himself, keeping his team alive in that game. If we were ever lucky enough to get a rematch of that game this year, do you think it would turn out the same way?
Geez, maybe. The biggest question mark, and I think a lot of the reason why certain voters didn't have Cortland as number one in their preseason polls was Lapp and Burgess were so great in that game, stretching the field, creating matchups, and clearly none of us that were there in Salem that night realized that these were NFL caliber guys, to be honest. We knew they had potential, but
pro potential,
but they are staying in camp. They are performing. We've seen a couple of players from last year's graduating class. Derek Sawika from Ithaca is signed with the Colts, and so
David Wallace,
with the Patriots. He had a nice punt return the other night. So a lot of top athletes that we got to see in the tournament last year, I think it would probably be more like the first half, maybe lower scoring, a little more conservative, but who knows? I think there was something that Coach Fitz saw that night with matchups. And, I'm never going to get his name right, but this Adiavo guy, he's this reserve wide receiver who comes out of nowhere, and they just didn't have an answer for him because they were so busy on the outsides with Burgess and Lapp.
I'll tell you what, we need to have him on the show just to tell us the pronunciation of his name, and maybe leading up to the September 21st show.
Ooh, that's a big game.
We could have him on. Before I get there, though, let's, you saw me doing the Landmark Media Day.
Yep.
And it became very apparent as I was talking to the different coaches and players that Cortland winning the national championship
changed everything.
It changed the mentality of the East Region players and coaches to a certain degree.
Yep.
And somebody put it really well during that. I can't remember exactly who it was, but they basically said, now we've seen it basically get into the tournament and you can win it.
Anything can happen.
Because remember, Cortland struggled to a certain degree against Endicott. Last chance for Endicott went a little high over everybody's head, Clayton Marengi.
Yep.
Hopefully you have him on the show this year because he's back for Endicott and he's going to be important for their possibilities down the line with a very interesting schedule coming up for them. But then, what was it? The Grove City game? Grove City.
Wide right or whatever it was. They could have won that game.
Alma, Carter St. John gets banged up in that game, and second half is a complete turnaround for Portland, and then lights out from there. So, it's true that to a certain degree, you get to the tournament now and you feel you can win the whole thing. And now, if you're a lower level team, you have a chance to win that first game because of the 40-team playoff scenario.
That's right.
And so you get a little bit of momentum underneath your feet going into that first round game against a tougher opponent. And who knows what could happen. But it really has installed this feeling of, hey, why not us now, even in the East region? It's no longer just an Ohio thing or a Wisconsin thing or a Texas thing.
Yeah.
But it is a national thing now, and it's actually exciting to see how that has played out.
Yep.
One note, bidding for the signed 50 jacket, we call it, by the Cortland Championship team is going to start at the website listed below here. We'll put it on the screen. Right after this show is dropped, basically, we'll put it out there for a week and let bidding go. And your bid, the winning bid ultimately, will go toward cancer research or a cancer cause that we're going to make sure is going to be one of the top ones out there. And I know Kurt Fitzpatrick and company were very helpful getting it back to us quickly, but we realized as we got it back, let's wait till we get closer to the season, get a little bit more interest generated on it. So that's why we held off until now.
It's a great memento from a great moment. So and yeah, if September is kind of gold month for pediatric cancer awareness, other cancer fundraisers happen. So if we can help the cause by auctioning off the jacket, even better.
One of the biggest games last season, in retrospect, in terms of maybe waking Cortland up, is going to replay itself in the other home this time around in Selinsgrove, which is where I was at for Media Day. So I'm going to wear a pathway down into Selinsgrove for the Susquehanna game. Cortland at Susquehanna. For us, it's a battle of two top 10 teams in our rankings, not for everybody, but maybe by that point it is, for all we know. Yeah. But that is an interesting game when you look at the setup, because Susquehanna has, I think, 7 graduate students back, and a quarterback that really made a name for himself last year for sure, and just. They know they can win this game, and they also believe because they did win that game, they could win a championship, even though they got kind of tossed out in the first round again last season. Yeah, I will be at that game. There's no secret to this point there, but what are your initial thoughts about replaying that game now?
Well, I mean, I think for Susquehanna, they know that they can beat Cortland because they did it last year, and I think this team is also coming back with a bit of a chip on their shoulder because of the way the first-round playoff game went. It's the second year in a row where they've been the home favorite and they lost. So I know that's something that they want to turn the corner on that, put that stuff behind them, and it would really make a statement for them as a program to take that and just win again. It shows that, hey, we took down the defending national champs on our home court, and then again, assuming that things go the way the voters in the landmark poll, Susquehanna is expected to run the table there. We'll see if anyone knocks them off along the way, but they should be like a top 10 ranked team all season, and beating Cortland would just cement that even more.
We'll talk more about those two teams when we go through our top 25 rankings in just a few minutes here. But looking back in 23, teams that surprised you, teams that disappointed you. Let's each go for one here. Maybe I go for surprise. Actually, I'll go for disappointment first. Mary Hardin-Baylor clearly was a disappointment. And it was one of those seasons where you thought they would get their feet underneath them enough not to get that fourth loss against Hardin-Simmons. And it didn't turn out that way in the end. But Isaac Fay being back this season is going to be, I think, important for them to have consistency under center, and we'll see where that goes. So there's my disappointment. For my surprise of the season last year, Grove City. I mean, we knew who Grove City was. Yeah. Okay, for the ECAC berths and discussions we've had, and I've gone to their games and everything else, but I didn't see 10-0 coming in a tough conference. I didn't see a win in the manner done, especially versus Susquehanna, and an almost second-round victory against the eventual national champs out there. So Grove City, they're going to be back with a vengeance this year, although Carnegie Mellon is going to be right there with them, as are other PAC teams. So my surprise, my disappointment there in reverse order. What do you got?
Well, I'll start off with my surprise, and maybe it's because I'm like a third Scottish. How about the Alma Scots?
Great Scots!
Yes, the Scots. They really burst onto the national scene last year, beating Mount Union in the playoffs, going undefeated.
Playoffs.
And right up until the halftime of that Cortland game, we thought maybe the Scots would be advancing, but injuries and other things, and the way Cortland's offenses took off in the second half pretty much put that game away. But still, no surprises in 24 with the Alma Scots. They're going to be in the conversation for the top 10, top 15 for probably most of the season. we'll see if they can recreate the magic that had them, literally half away from advancing to the national semifinals.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention Quarterbacks versus Cancer, started by Carter St. John. You'll hear a lot more about it if you go back to the Around the Nation podcast and hear different quarterbacks participating in it, give some thoughts. And I am going to make every attempt this season to get out to Alma and cover a game and maybe dig a little deeper into Quarterbacks versus Cancer this season, because not only are we talking about a great cause, we're talking about a great team this season as well, as you point out. Yeah. And so there's going to be some great football played by Alma. The first game of the season for them is going to be very good. Wish I could get out there for. Easy for me to say. Versus River Falls. More about that in a little bit. But there's your surprise. Who disappointed you last year besides Mayor Hardin Baylor? Because I guess I stole your purple. Picture college too.
I think it's tough I'm not a big disappointments kind of guy, but I think since you threw the name out there, I felt in the preseason last year we thought that River Falls might make a run at the WIAC, whatever we call it, ACK this year. They ended up 7-3. They lost the games that we thought they might win, and so it'll be interesting to see. Are they just kind of this perennial sort of fourth place team in that league? And you could also argue that Whitewater going 11-2 and not winning the conference was a bit of a surprise. They seem like they've fallen off a bit, maybe not. I don't know.
I don't know about that.
We'll see. But we think that they're going to be good. They're up pretty high in our preseason top 25. You'll see that in a few minutes.
So as we do transition into 2024 here, let's talk about what we kind of made light of in our cold open. And it's good we can make light of it to a certain degree now after what happened in 2020 into 2021, obviously. COVID, the effects of it on D3 football. A lot of what we're seeing in terms of changing of the guard, I have to say, is probably COVID related in terms of rosters, fifth years, all that stuff. There's definitely a sea change. Okay, that's clear. We used to talk about 3, 4, maybe 5 teams, depending on what was going on. Wesley gone now, so back to the 4 number. But now it's not just 4 teams out there; it's several teams out there. What we got there? Yep, Wesley. We miss you. We miss the Wolverines. We certainly do.
Here next to my hat from Coach Bubna, MIT. I got this last year in Boston, so thanks, Coach. We'll see what the engineers are up to this fall.
So anyway, COVID. I talked about Susquehanna, 7 grad students on the roster this season. They will have a major impact, I think, this year. Is this real? What do you think of what happens this year, what happens after this year when we don't have that phenomenon continuing?
Well, I think it'll depend on the prevalence or the lack thereof of the transfer portal. We haven't seen as much of that in Division III, but there are some players who've taken advantage of it. One rather big transfer was the one of the Aurora wide receiver to North Central, I believe, in this past offseason. So we're still seeing that. We're seeing some guys that are doing a graduate year. Connor Gunn from Hobart is now going to play at Johns Hopkins. So, we'll see if those things change around. But yeah, I think things might settle down after the COVID 5th year situation. But we're also approaching a time in where most colleges, especially the smaller ones that are in D3, are going to start really seeing that enrollment cliff after the class of 25. And so getting players to campus is going to be tougher and tougher. There's just less kids going to be applying to college. Yeah,
it's unfortunate that we're losing schools. Even D2, St. Rose, by my zone up in Albany there, losing a school like that is shocking to the system. Yeah. But there are more where that came from. So
lost
COVID,
Birmingham Southern last.
Exactly. And a lot of that was before COVID, but it got, I think, down that hill just rolling basically because of COVID, and never could look back to get themselves righted. Keystone, obviously, a little on the brink at times, but looks like that they're going to survive. They just made a payment, it looks like, and they'll be okay for the time being. Look, we don't want to lose any more D3 schools. We want to add back to 250, which was our top number, I think, before COVID in terms of participants in D3 football. So to heck with COVID. Let's hope it never happens again. But if something like it does, hopefully we learn some lessons that will avoid some of the same train wrecks that we encountered.
Yeah.
Also, now we're going to play some football. Let's talk about the new rules, because there are some very large new rules. Not many of them out there, but they're large. Timing rules. D3 is adopting the D1, D2 timing rules from last year. So that means first downs will not stop the clock until 2 minutes left in both halves. And then this year they are adding a 2-minute warning in the halves that will allow for basically the extra, quote, timeout for both teams to strategize a little bit differently. So it's an interesting give and take in that situation. Personally, I wish they didn't touch any of this, that we just had the normal timing rules, because nothing was really that broken and nothing has really gotten that fixed in the process here. Lengthening games, maybe figure out a way to cut down on instant replays and stuff like that. But wait a minute,
instant replay
is going to join the fray for Division III during the regular season. The Centennial Conference has committed to it in their rule book. Landmark is considering it right now. What the utility of it will be from team to team, I don't know, because 3 camera setups, which is probably the minimum you can get away with to do this, are not going to be exactly fruitful for like goal line type looks and stuff like that.
And I'm honestly trying to think of what situations
Targeting.
last year. Well, I guess targeting would be the most relevant. But I'm just trying to think of the games from last year. Like, where would it have changed the outcome or something, or like where you really needed a replay to say like, oh, okay.
Cole Burgess touchdown to start the second half in the end zone with the toe tap situation he had there. So that was important to, I think, change the call ultimately, because I think they initially had called him incomplete in that play.
Right.
But that was an ESPN 20 camera type setup. That's not going to be, what we're going to see is more like what we saw in the semifinals, where the 5 camera setups that we had both at Randolph-Macon and at Wartburg were not well placed, because they're just not made for those scenarios, those stadiums.
No.
And so I think that's going to be closer to the whole thing. We're going to have a lot of stoppages to go look at something, and then inconclusiveness on the replay. So we'll see how it goes. This will be the first year of it, and we'll see how the referees respond to the whole thing in those conferences that choose to use it. Remember, it will also affect their home non-conference games. So another rule changing this year is allowance of 1 player to have helmet communication with officials. There should be a green dot there, I think, if it's the right one.
This helmet's about 10 years old.
Yeah, so
is this thing on?
I don't think that's going to be the one ultimately.
No.
So,
okay.
But long story short, that will be allowed. I believe tablets also allowed now on field. So Rowan has a new coach, but there was a bugaboo with that situation before he exited. And so maybe that changes the game a little bit for how they get their information down at the field. High schools had access to tablets, and pros had access to tablets. So I guess the question ultimately became, why didn't college? So I believe that has changed officially this year. Also, horse collar tackles in the tackle box are now going to be assessed as personal fouls. And that was always an inconsistency that didn't make much sense. A horse collar is a horse collar, right?
Yeah.
So that will now be it.
Pretty obvious.
Yep.
Okay.
A real thing. And finally, for me, I can actually go and interview coaches if we're the broadcast partner of a game in the first and third quarter break, basically right after the first and right after the third quarter. So look out. If Coach Toop were still coaching, he'd be like, "Get away from me, Ross." It doesn't matter.
He'd be like, no. Beat it, kid.
Yep. So we'll see how that plays out. Okay. Our top 25 going into the season now as we turn the corner. There it is. Hello. So let's look at basically our 19 through 25 page first. You can see 25 Endicott, 24 John Carroll, 23 Bethel, 22 Trinity of Texas. More on that in a second. 21 Carnegie Mellon, 20 Linfield, and 19 Randolph-Macon. Kind of a drop-off for Randolph-Macon and Trinity in terms of opinions on them this season, but they both lose a lot.
All-time quarterbacks and running backs and all sorts of defenders and all types of things are going to need to be replaced there. So jury's out on them, for my opinion.
Yeah. Trinity with Welkerhorn maybe coming up in a couple of years returns maybe to that luster. But, I don't see them completely dropping off here this year. I think they're still going to be competitive.
Oh, yeah.
I think the Berry game is still going to be the SAA championship game ultimately. So we'll see where that goes. Randolph-Macon, maybe a little tougher haul because they lost a lot of skilled players in that situation too, but we'll see where it goes. Going to the next page, we have Mary Hardin-Baylor in our top 25. We just missed in the D3 football top 25.
Mostly him.
Thanks. Wheaton at 17, Hardin-Simmons at 16, Berry at 15, Aurora at 14, Muhlenberg at 13.
Tell Coach Milne.
Yeah, well, we did tell him, and he was a little bit like, can we make that move off the list altogether? Because coaches never like to have, I think, too much momentum in the heads of the players that way, because that's a great way to get slapped, I think. Yeah. But hey, that's not our problem. That's yours, coaches.
I will also say that I imagine we probably raised some eyebrows having Wheaton near the bottom of our 15 range. I mean, there were some voters who had them in the top 5. I think the graduation of Ben Thorson was big, even though the Giovanni Weeks is back. And you saw that team in person, and they got throttled by North Central. And I know they had that one last playoff game where they turned it around, but I just don't know if that team and their conference is just as good as everybody thinks.
I wish they would get a schedule, ability to get a few games out of conference to build themselves a little bit better. Yes, the CCIW is a decent conference.
Yeah.
Okay, when you toss out North Central, still a decent conference. Yeah. But it is starting to replicate itself a little bit like the OAC in that you had Mount Union and John Carroll, it seemed like, all the time. But you had Mount Union and you had John Carroll.
Yeah.
Okay? You've got North Central and you've got Wheaton. The Little Brass Bell is not going anywhere, I don't think, this year. And you know what? Prove me wrong. Go ahead. And go ahead and replay this clip right now, by all means.
Put it on the bulletin board or whatever you want.
Rossi says the Little Brass Bell is not going anywhere. Yeah, but Aurora at 14, interesting. Don Beebe just keeps rolling on there, and we'll see if that will be a continuation pretty early on, because they play who in their first game, or at least the team they're playing's first game of the season?
North Central.
North Central.
Week 2.
Yep, on the 14th. So we'll see. We'll see what
that
Aurora really is here.
Playoff preview.
Yep.
I mean, geez.
Let's go to a little bit more depth here now. We're in our top 12. River Falls, you mentioned earlier, Caleb Blaha and company bring a lot back, and I think they have a chance to get over the hump to a certain degree, so we have them a little bit higher than others do. 11, Johns Hopkins, new head coach. Bay Harvey's still there, though.
Yeah.
Will Leger still there.
Yeah.
Luke Sherman, he's at UCLA. Congratulations, Luke.
Yeah.
But what do you think? I mean, I think a game's going to tell us a lot.
Yeah, I think it'll tell us a lot about both teams. I know that we got into trouble with some Ithaca fans because we didn't have the Bombers on our list. Sorry, guys. I think you had them at 23. I had them. I just feel like they lost a lot to graduation. We'll have to see if this Colin Shum, I think his name is, the quarterback who took over after Wingfield got injured. So, the Bombers will still probably be the Liberty League favorites, but the whole Liberty League kind of lost a lot to graduation last year. So that conference might be down. We'll see. Hopkins, Ithaca, week 1, worth watching.
Into the top 10, Grove City at number 10. Did you ever think we'd be saying that in our preseason rankings, that Grove City would be number 10?
It's been amazing to watch the rise of this, because they were sort of our go-to ECAC Bowl participant, reaction, and and they seem like they were kind of just stuck in that tier. And I love how their coach added to their saying about competing for PAC and now national championships. Things are happening in Grove City. It's exciting.
My favorite part of the PAC Media Day is Logan Piper, who is a shy guy when it comes to media stuff, but who is an absolute authority on the field as quarterback, a field general indeed. He was just sweating there the whole time. It was like, I felt so bad for him, because I know it is not his gig to be that guy like that.
In the media room.
In the media room, But, good for him, and good for Coach DiDonato as well. Wartburg at number 9. Now, this is a tough one, because you lose Niall McLaughlin. You lose
Owen Grover.
He
was probably the best linebacker last year in the country.
So you lose 2 major leaders on each side of the ball. Can they repeat themselves, essentially, is the question in terms of a top 4, top 5 type team. Their schedule, let's say, might be quasi-favorable in conference to get back to the playoffs and do something. I just don't know if they're going to get that momentum the same way. It's going to be an interesting season for Wartburg, but obviously the brand they have now will get them recruits.
Do they have a new turbo?
Who knows? Because Hunter Clausen is the other missing link there, as you're pointing out.
Yeah.
So we'll find out, but we have enough confidence in what they keep putting out right now to have them at number 9 for now. Number 8, though, St. John's.
They bumped up.
They did. And, hey, you got Aaron Severson back. I mean, that's a great start right there.
I guess we could have thrown them out for disappointments last season. Them not making the playoffs surprised a lot of people.
Good point. Very good point. Yep. But we'll see.
Change.
We'll see there. Lacrosse is going to get a huge test at number 7 against RPI unranked. You know, everything we just said about the Liberty League and how weak it is, they could maybe turn around and just
shock
quick.
Everybody. We'll see.
Number 6, we have it as kind of an overlay here compared to most folks, Susquehanna. But I think it's fitting. And you know what? We're going to learn a lot on the 21st. So stay tuned for that. That is a game versus Cortland. Mount Union at number 5. Now, this is a leap of faith on who Mount Union is because we don't know how you replace Wayne Ruby and Braxton Plunk, among others, obviously.
Duke. Yeah, there's a lot of great players on that team.
So you sort of buy into the idea that it is a machine and that
Coach Dart is just going to keep signing guys up.
So
power.
We assume it. But the team that beat them in the playoffs narrowly last year, Alma, at number 4. Carter St. John and company have proven they're worthy of this. And if Carter St. John had remained healthy in that game versus Cortland,
who knows?
It could have been a whole different script in terms of what happened at the end of that season. So they have the ability there. Number 3, another leap of faith of sorts, but not really. There's some rationale behind this, obviously. Whitewater. You know, they say it's a new starting quarterback, but it's not. He had some experience last year.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I think they need a consistency at the skill positions, avoid the injuries, and Whitewater will be Whitewater. That's just who they are. Yes, things have evened out in the Wisconsin League, in the conference, but Whitewater still, I think, has that edge in recruiting over there.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, when you're pulling close to 20,000 fans to your home games and you've got those kind of facilities, I mean, I always kind of joke around a little bit about the WIAC. I mean, they're really sort of like an FCS league that just happens to be in a D3 football thing. But yeah, they're very strong and should be in contention for the title again.
Then 1 versus 2 question, which really even you folks couldn't.
We were split, 50-50.
Everything was split on this one.
110 votes, right? Wasn't that we got?
It was crazy, right down the middle. And some folks said, "Well, no, that's not how you do it." Well, no, the votes that showed a favoritism of North Central over Cortland or vice versa was completely split.
Yeah.
So what do? How do we figure this out? It was tough. We literally had a conversation about it, and I said, I think you got to give the edge to North Central here, JB, because Luke Lanin, okay, Zach boys, don't take this the wrong way, but Luke Lanin is not going to go and have a losing Stag record in my view. And he is 1-2 right now in Stag Bowls. So he needs to win out and win the Stag Bowl to graduate at 2-2. All those numbers, those prolific wins number, that's just impossible number of wins for a quarterback in this day and age.
41 already or something like that? It's crazy.
So,
50.
41-0 in non-Stag Bowls, so 42-2 overall, I believe that is. So, or 42-2. So, that is the edge. It's the Luke Lanin factor. And Joe Sacco, I think, is a quality enough back here that there's going to be the balance on offense better this year than last year.
And even with the graduation of Hardy, they've got that guy coming in from Aurora, and there are some question marks. I mean, I know we spoke with Fran after the Stag Bowl, or maybe even during the Stag Bowl. He was telling us about how a couple of Cortland's starting receivers were injured, and so a lot of the guys that were playing or kind of come up through the system and all this. So maybe Cortland is, I had them as my 1 for the record. Frank had North Central. We sort of split it down the middle. But yeah, I think when push comes to shove for this combined thing, I think Luke Lanin does make a difference.
So that's our top 25 rankings. We don't call it a poll because it's just us, although we asked for a little assistance there on 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and that's what we came up with ultimately. Okay, as we continue now looking forward, stories heading into week 1. And really the stories are, first, the big games. And we've named some of them, but let's go through them again. Lacrosse at RPI. You have Hopkins at Ithaca. That's was a great game last year to be in attendance for. Union at Utica on a Friday night, I believe.
Yeah, the lights.
Coach Strock getting his debut, and against Coach Fagiano.
I think Moose Hogan is going to be in the audience.
What you gonna do? River Falls at Alma, which is again a big game.
Big game.
And in week 2, we do want to underscore again North Central at Aurora. Yeah. And as you said, with a player kind of defecting,
interesting.
It'll be an interesting life for him for 60 minutes, that's for sure. But there's that, obviously. The expanded bracket and new selection process. Hey, kids, good news. We've got 40 teams, or a maximum of 40 teams at least, that will now be in the whole thing. I think it was the other way around. You had to do it. Yeah, we're backwards, so that's why it's happened that way. I don't want people to think that you didn't know how to show 40. So anyway, 40 teams. So we got the expansion. The bad news is, my God, the selection process. What were you thinking making these changes at this point? Why not let it go for a year and see how it worked with the normal selection process? And then if it really was still broken in your view, then, all bets are off. We got some weird anomalies possible now. You could beat a team and be placed behind them even though you're within 1 win or loss of them, which is never supposed to happen.
No.
It's a little embarrassing when you look at, for years we had to admit to ourselves that football is not like other sports with just 9 or 10 games in the books, or 8 for some teams, I guess, if you want to look at it that way, especially if you're only comparing D3 stuff. So we've grown to admit that, okay?
Yeah. The problem with all the number crunching is that there's not enough numbers.
No, and it's all going to look the same.
The analysis will always fall short. There's just not enough games.
I mean, you can't add any subjectivity at all now.
No.
Nothing. And basically a number is going to drive everything, or a set of numbers is going to drive everything, period. So you can't have that discussion. That team that's within 0.05 on the strength of schedule, they could only play 1 non-conference game, so maybe we treat that different. There was common sense they try to apply in those situations back when. And now common sense is gone because now it's just, hey, we're returning the dials this year, kids.
Let's see here. Where did I put my
calculator?
Yeah, well, no, it's not where I thought it was. Well, I was looking for my little lighter thing. This is the power index thing. I was just going to light it on fire.
Okay.
And, but it's good. I don't want. My wife would probably get mad if I was lighting flames.
Please don't do that. That would be great for the blooper reel, probably more than anything else.
Yeah.
But. Let's hit on this in a minute because there is a question coming up about that. Before we get into Q&A from the fans, so any surprises coming up this year that you can foresee?
Surprises as far as like rules and
anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news is that for 8 teams, they're going to have a legit. They're going to get into the playoffs where normally they would either have to go to maybe a bowl game, and there are certain parts of the country where there aren't bowl games. I mean, at this point, we have the ACACs in the Northeast. We've got the New England Bowl, sort of, although I think that's morphing now with some of the changes to the conferences up there. We've had a couple of bowls added in Virginia. We obviously have the bowls in Wisconsin, and now we've got the ones that open doors in Ohio. But for second place teams from conferences like the Liberty League, I mean, we did have 2 that made it last year, I guess. But there could be some new entrants into the field that we haven't seen in a long time. That'll be interesting. I think I'm looking forward to being surprised, hopefully in a good way, with that. And
some new teams winning playoff games because the bar on the opening round games will be much lower, obviously, because they're going to be teams that did not outperform necessarily the rest of the field in the season, but they're going to be pitted against each other. So, a team that usually wouldn't win will win a game, and there will be I believe 16 teams, is it, get pitted there?
Yeah.
Let's see.
So the top 8 don't
24,
play.
8, yep, it's 16 teams.
Yeah.
So the top 24 teams don't play, 16 teams do play, and 8 games in week 1 of the playoffs now. And then you go to a 32-team situation in week 2 as normal.
Yeah.
So we're doing a whip around. It's going to now probably be in week 2 because you'll have 16 games in week 2 of the playoffs.
And the other thing, too, that will be new, which might benefit both teams in a way, is that there's going to be a break between the semifinals and the Stag Bowl. So guys could get healthy. There could be some game plan changing that we could see, like completely new offenses on the field for the Stag Bowl.
Yep.
Will really change how those games are coached and how
injuries could be repaired by that point that weren't otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, because the playoffs are just like this 5-week push that you have to survive. But now, if you make it to the Stag Bowl, you're going to get, like 2 weeks off or a week and a half?
Let's see, maybe closer to 3 weeks, to be honest with you.
So that's a long break. And so there might be some rust, and who knows? We'll see what happens.
Yep, so where the Stag Bowl used to be in terms of the calendar, the semifinals will now be, and then the championship game will be the week after New Year's.
Yeah.
So Unique, D2 basically went to that system, or FCS, went to that system recently, and we're going that way too now in Division 3.
All right.
Q&A time from our good friends out there in Twitterland. First off, Rambo's Carving Knife, who I always love jaunting with on Twitter, who is Pritzker's Gun, asks, was Van Halen better with Sammy? Also, can you go over the expanded playoffs in terms of calendar and time frames? I don't think the majority of people realize the dates of playoffs will be very different. Well, we just hit that one for you. So now his first question.
Wow. You could need a whole podcast to debate the differences between David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar. I will just say that I think Van Halen was sort of a more fun party band with Dave, and then they became more serious songwriters, and they had bigger hits and bigger albums with Sammy Hagar. So, and technically as a singer, I'd say Sammy had a more powerful voice.
You didn't think Hot for Teacher was a serious song?
Not really, no. But when I was a kid, I thought it was funny.
Wow. Don't know what to say. Let's go to a fun one. Tony Maldonado asks,
"Hey, Big Tone!
Hey, is hashtag Moose Hogan and Friends the best parent-based hype group in D3?" Pretty darn good.
Pretty far, yeah. I mean, when you look at both the consistency and the quality of the hype videos week in, week out.
What you gonna do when Moose Hogan runs wild over you?
You know.
That was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Did you hurt yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Okay. We're going to keep going here. Dingo Talk, who released their own top 25 recently.
Yeah, they did.
A lot of new faces at the helm of programs. Who's in the best position to win now year one? Also, third division, in a similar type of question, asks, which new head coaches have a chance to turn their programs around? Well,
I think the easiest answer is Del Val.
Yeah. Duke leaving is obviously a big change. Mm-hmm. So, your new head coach probably...
But a guy who's been there for what?
Yeah.
His whole career.
So that's probably a good one there. John Drock at Union to keep a program, to get wins, to kind of go more toward Dingo Talk's question here.
Yeah.
I think he's got a good opportunity, and he's been kind of really well received after the whole Coach Poppy situation, going to Columbia after just 1 year. Don't blame him one bit.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting setup for him to come into. Granted, Donovan Piccatti is gone as quarterback, and he loses some other key pieces, but Michael Fiore is still around, Cole De Silva on defense around, so I think he'll have a good go of it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't remind everybody, former Union head coach John Audino's wife Tina, who was a big friend of our show, passed away recently, and she is definitely missed by us. Coach, who is still coaching at LaSalle Academy in Troy, New York. Hold your head up, guy.
Hope I can give him a hug when I'm in Troy in a couple weeks.
There you go. Absolutely. So Antoine Cuff asks, who are your dark horses to make the playoffs this year? Okay, so Antoine, yes, Salisbury probably has a chance with the setup of the NJAC this year. I'm just saying, buddy. I know where you're coming from
Saying
just
there's
from
still a
asking the
chance.
question, but Salisbury is another one of those teams that reloads.
Yep.
And Rowan's going to have an interesting situation this year. Coach Ruley going over there is a big gain for them, I think, in head coaching. But first year is going to be tough. But Ruley, to go back to the previous question, has a chance to be one of the guys that we could have said in that question.
Absolutely.
But, Coach Wood and company at Salisbury have a good chance, I think, to get into the playoffs this year.
I like Barry. They had traditionally been locked out as a 9-1 team in the SAA, but the fact they've got Cade coming back at running back, they bring back a lot of that explosive offense that went toe-to-toe with Tucker Horn and company. I had a front row seat in that 100-degree hot day. I think they have a really good chance to win the SAA, I think, this year, and we'll see them probably host and maybe go pretty far. We'll see.
Michael Owine, is it? Mike, you should probably send us a pronunciation guide for your name. Oine. I think it's Owine or something. Well, we'll find out soon, I'm sure. So he asks, and this is an interesting one, so we'll go here. I listened to the podcast with a guy trying to explain the new playoff format for D3 football, and while I know he knows what he's talking about, it became very convoluted. For the fan or football parent trying to grasp some sense of how the new system works, can you dumb it down a little?
No.
Really? Have a great day, everybody.
Dumb it down.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here it goes. No longer are you going to be compared directly game to game against teams. So if you beat a team with a certain name, it's going to get included into the statistics the same way no matter what, and they don't look back anymore at that game. So Hopkins beats Ithaca in week 1. Ithaca could still be ahead of Hopkins with similar records because maybe a strength of schedule meter is going to read out differently ultimately, or that one loss win difference is going to be so catastrophic to the numbers that ultimately it displaces the head-to-head scenario. Things like that are possible now.
Absolutely.
But more or less, you're asking for us to explain how it's going to work. Wins and losses will matter in terms of total numbers, and strength of schedule will matter in terms of the total numbers and how your teams you played essentially fare throughout the season.
Yeah.
So it's, for as much as they try to make an index, it looks like, with the dials they turned, that will not penalize teams with only one out-of-conference game, the numbers would tell me otherwise right now. That basically the strength of schedule for those conferences is going to mediate toward a certain 500 number ultimately. And so maybe you get a little bit of a bounce because there's a slight gain for an away game win versus a home game win scenario, or loss for that matter. So there is that out there too. But long story short, teams that play more out-of-conference games, that play teams that end up with records above 500 overall, are going to have an edge. That's still the case. That's always been the case.
Yeah, that hasn't changed.
It's really become more or less, we have thrown out the ability to be subjective in these situations. So we're going to let numbers do all the talking and only the numbers. And the problem was that the number system hasn't changed much, what's going into the numbers. But the numbers are going to dictate now. Period, exclamation point. You cannot displace these numbers.
Yeah.
And that was the problem was the numbers. The problem was the numbers, guys. And we just said, to hell with the human factor that was actually helping to even it out a little bit. We're going to go back to the numbers and just the numbers. Yeah, no.
What could possibly go wrong?
So win your games and make sure you have teams on your schedule that
win most of their games.
Yeah. So, yes, it would suggest schedule strong teams. But here's the other problem.
But don't lose those games. Otherwise, you're screwed.
But you can find teams like that in your own region, usually in other conferences. So this has actually taken away the incentive to go out of region, like a Texas versus Wisconsin type game.
Yeah.
Because
that doesn't help anymore.
Why do you need to go there?
You don't.
just go find a team in the other conferences in your region that are going to win 7 games in that season, and you're ahead of the game that way.
Yeah.
And if you're a team in a 9-conference game league, 10-team league, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, all the stuff we talked about the pack before, with the no non-conference situation, it still plays out this way, but now hard and fast it plays out this way. So yeah, you might have that one game that's going to be exceptional on your win-loss record because maybe you play in Alma or something like that, and they go 9-1.
Yeah, it's good that you brought up the pack, because I'm sitting here thinking what if Carnegie Mellon ends up 9-1 again? I mean, and if they lose the head-to-head to Grove City, and Grove City gets the playoff berth, typically you'd think a conference as strong as the pack could get into an expanded playoff field, but if half the conference has 500 or less records because they all played each other, and then it's going to be tough for them to overcome that.
Everybody was saying pairwise works so well in other sports and it'll work fine in
30, 40
hockey.
Games. I mean, come on, way more data.
Hockey is in the upper 20s to 30 region, especially in D1 hockey. That is the standard bearer for pairwise. And nobody has a problem with it because there's only 60 teams in Division I hockey.
Yeah.
Okay? And so it plays out okay. There's enough cross-country games because of the money that these schools will spend on D1 hockey that it plays out okay. Even D3 hockey, it plays out okay because there's just not this huge number of teams out there that sort of makes all these numbers look very similar to each other, and you don't have the cross competition to justify how your rankings come out. Or to take away justification of how the rankings go out in that situation.
So it looks like we got something that was chopped off here by Tim Schumacher, and he was talking about how the MIAC is phasing out its championship game, and so his question is is this going to be because of the D3 expanded playoffs? What is the talk trend in other conferences regarding scheduling championship weeks? Does playoff expansion help or hurt opportunities for new bowl games?
Okay, so to take the first part first here, looks like the PAC's going to a conference championship structure because they want to be able to play a modified round robin such that they can schedule out-of-conference games. Smart move.
Yeah.
It still is a smart move, no matter what happened here. So ultimately, if you have too many teams in your conference, then you should be actually employing that. The MIAC's problem was they had a really butt-backward, we'll call it, way of determining their ties and all that stuff. I don't understand what they were thinking in how
Better
they
than the
created.
USA South.
Okay, that's goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
But anyway, no, but it was just so strained, the whole thing, that I don't know why tossing the championship game would be a good idea. I think just rethink your system.
Yeah.
And that may have been the better way of handling it. Maybe not have a Bethel-St. John's matchup every year. Well, not this year, but this past year, rather. But you get the point. But others seem to be okay with the idea of maybe employing a championship weekend, because why not? You're going to start getting momentum for that team toward the playoffs.
Yeah.
Would you rather be playing, some lower caliber team and play the whole rest up risk thing, or would you rather play a meaningful game so that as you start building that momentum, you're in good shape? Plus, if you win that game, it might be enough to propel you out of the week 1 opening round scenario.
You get a bye, which is huge.
Yep.
Yeah.
And buys are something we've never really had to talk about since 1999.
Wow.
In the playoff system.
Yeah.
Well, 2004, really. But
how old were we then?
Okay, just keep rolling. But yeah, that's the change. Bowls, I think they're going to be more incentive for bowls because there's only 8 games on week 1 of the playoffs now. So there's more focus. I'm just as willing to go out to a bowl game now, especially if you schedule some night bowl games if you can get away with it in the weather in certain areas.
Yeah.
And maybe one of us shows up to the game and celebrates the fact
did
you've done that.
I remember when the ECAC did that at Franklin Field a couple of years ago in Philadelphia. It was fantastic and under the lights. Yeah.
So that's what we got there. As JC asked, we'd enjoy hearing y'all's thoughts on non-conference strength of schedule in the ASC with the round robin conference schedule. Thanks for doing what y'all do. Enjoy the show. We enjoy you asking the question. Look, it technically doesn't matter if you play the same teams twice, 3 times, or whatever.
SCIAC's going to do it.
It's still a 500 scenario.
Yeah.
If you can't schedule out of conference games aplenty, then you got to do something to get a full schedule. The bigger problem ultimately is scheduling non-D3 teams with the opportunities you would have had to schedule out of conference games that would matter inside the numbers. There's the rub. And those games are completely discounted now in the new system. Again,
Just
throw
them out.
So that's not even included anymore.
It's not going to help.
So that's more my concern for the ASC in a year like this. Mary Hardin-Baylor, I'm looking at you on this one. But, playing Hardin-Simmons twice could be very fortuitous for them.
Yeah, they win both. That's
If
big.
they win both, it's got to help a little bit in this scenario. But again, the win-loss records inside the conference will meander closer to 500 than maybe they could have if they had a couple more conference teams and then just played each other once and then found a bunch of non-conference games that would have counted. So it's the give and take right now of the new situation, but just to have the ASC still around is important, and that's not a given for much longer, as most people know. We'll hit that, I'm sure, another day.
Yep.
So, JB.
That was a lot.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
So
I think that's it, right?
I think we got one more thing or two here.
That's
What's
it.
next for us? As we said, we're going to go for Regions 1 and 2 show, and then 3 and 4, then 5 and 6 with interviews aplenty in each one of those shows. So be prepared for all that coming up over the next couple of weeks. The auction as well is going to be starting up, as we said, for the Cortland 50 jacket. And what are your final thoughts?
Well, I'm just looking forward to another exciting season. I mean, last year we saw something that never happened in like 20-something, 32 years.
Yep.
So that's going to be a tough one to beat. But I feel like with this more wide open field now and a bigger playoff field, it should be really exciting. Stick with us.
And I'm going to be around covering a lot of games again and trying to get into more locations I've never been at. And I was telling coaches...
I need to get up to a few more locations too.
Please do. But, I was telling coaches even at the Landmark Media Day, hey, give me a game that I've never been to your place before. Give me a game to come to. Win those games this season and make it important so that it's justified the expense and the coverage and everything else, and that I can actually get out to see some places I've never been before. Alma, I can't wait to go see that if I do get the opportunity. And there are many other places out there.
I loved going to Barrie last year. What a beautiful campus.
Valhalla.
Yeah, Valhalla, the Axe, the whole thing. That was great.
But, I've gone to Texas plenty of times. I'm sure I'll go back a few more before this is all said and done.
Well, when it's all said and done, Texas is the ultimate location if you want to be in the championship game. So,
amen to that. So, Stag Bowl 51 coming up in 2025. It's the 2024 National Championship. Don't forget that. It's still the 2024 National Championship being played in 2025. We never said that.
Stag Bowl's older than me.
On that note, folks, from JB's Kitchen, because that's where we do our first preseason show every year. It's been fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you with several shows coming up. Stay tuned.